President, were you physically intimate with Monica Lewinsky?
Mr. Bittman, I think maybe I can save you and the grand jurors a lot of time if I read a statement which I think will make it clear what the nature of my relationship with Ms. Lewinsky was, how it related to the testimony I gave, what I was trying to do in that testimony. And I think it will perhaps make it possible for you to ask even more relevant questions from your point of view. And with your permission, I'd like to read that statement.
Absolutely. Please, Mr. President.
When I was alone with Ms. Lewinsky on certain occasions in early 1996 and once in early 1997, I engaged in conduct that was wrong. These encounters did not consist of sexual intercourse. They did not constitute sexual relations as I understood that term to be defined at my January 17, 1998 deposition. But they did involve inappropriate, intimate contact. These inappropriate encounters ended at my insistence in early 1997. I also had occasional telephone conversations with Ms. Lewinsky that included inappropriate sexual banter. I regret that what began as a friendship came to include this conduct, and I take full responsibility for my actions. While I will provide the grand jury whatever other information I can, because of privacy considerations affecting my family, myself, and others, and in an effort to preserve the dignity of the office I hold, this is all I will say about the specifics of these particular matters. I will try to answer to the best of my ability other questions, including questions about my relationship with Ms. Lewinsky, questions about my understanding of the term sexual relations as I understood it to be defined at my January 17, 1998 deposition. And I believe that is the definition that most ordinary Americans would give it. If you said Jane and Harry have a sexual relationship, and you're not talking about people being drawn into a lawsuit and being given definitions and then a great effort to trick them in some way, but you're just talking about people in ordinary conversation, I'll bet the grand jurors, if they were talking about two people they know and said they have a sexual relationship, they meant they were sleeping together. They meant they were having intercourse together. So I'm not at all sure that this affidavit is not true and was not true in Ms. Lewinsky's mind at the time she swore it out. They proceeded to cross the country and try to turn up whatever they could, not because they thought it would help their case. By the time they did this discovery, they knew what the deal was in their case, and they knew what was going to happen, and Judge Wright subsequently threw it out. Now, let me finish, Mr. Bennett. You brought this up. Excuse me, Mr. Bittman. What they wanted to do, and what they did do, and what they had done by the time I showed up here, was to find any negative information they could on me, whether it was true or not, get it in a deposition, and then leak it. Anyway, she worked in the Chief of Staff's office. One night she brought me some pizza. We had some remarks. She had given me a particularly nice book for Christmas, an antique book on presidents. She knew that I collected old books, and it was a very nice thing. And I just thought I ought to get up a few things and give them to her before she left. Ms. Lewinsky said something to me like, what if they ask me about the gifts you've given me? That's the memory I had. That's why I'd question whether it happened on the 28th because she had a subpoena with a request for production. And I told her that if they asked her for gifts, she'd have to give them whatever she had, that's what the law was.
After this relationship, this inappropriate intimate relationship between you and Ms. Lewinsky ended, she continued to send you numerous intimate notes, cards. Is that right?
Well, some of them were somewhat intimate. I'd say most of the notes and cards were affectionate, all right, but she had clearly accepted the fact that there could be no contact between us that was in any way inappropriate.
Well, not only did you not try to involve her, you specifically tried to exclude her and everyone else. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, I've never, I mean, it's almost humorous, sir. I'd have to be an exhibitionist not to have tried to exclude everyone else.
She says you told her. I was never alone with her, right?
Well, I was never alone with her.
Did you not say that, Mr. President?
Mr. Bittman, just a minute. I was never alone with her, right, might be a question. And what I might have meant by that is in the Oval Office complex.
You knew the answer.
We've been going for more than an hour. Would you mind if we take a break? I need to go to the restroom.
Can you tell the grand jury what is tricky about the question, did anyone other than your attorneys ever tell you?
No, there's nothing. I'm just telling, I have explained, I will now explain for the third time, sir. I was being asked a number of questions here. I was struggling to remember them. There were lots of things that had gone on during this time period that had nothing to do with Monica Lewinsky. You know, I believed then, I believe now, that Monica Lewinsky could have sworn out an honest affidavit that under reasonable circumstances and without the benefit of what Linda Tripp did to her would have given her a chance not to be a witness in this case. So I didn't have perfect memory of all these events that have now, in the last 7 months, since Miss Lewinsky was kept for several hours by 4 or 5 of your lawyers and 4 or 5 FBI agents, as if she were a serious felon. These things have become the most important matters in the world. At the moment they were occurring, many other things were going on. It now appears to me they didn't because they were afraid I would give them a truthful answer, and that there had been some communication between you and Ms. Tripp and them, and they were trying to set me up and trick me. And now you seem to be complaining that they didn't do a good enough job. I did my best, sir, at this time. I did not know what I now know about this. A lot of other things were going on in my life. Did I want this to come out? No. Was I embarrassed about it? Yes. Did I ask her to lie about it? No. Did I believe there could be a truthful affidavit? Absolutely. Now, that's all I know to say about this. I will continue to answer your questions as best I can. My goal in this deposition was to be truthful, but not particularly helpful. I did not wish to do the work of the Jones lawyers. I deplored what they were doing. I deplored the innocent people they were tormenting and traumatizing. I deplored their illegal leaking. I deplored the fact that they knew, once they knew our evidence, that this was a bogus lawsuit, and that because of the funding they had from my political enemies, they were putting ahead. I deplored it, but I was determined to walk through the minefield of this deposition without violating the law, and I believe I did.
Mr. President, it's not our intent to embarrass you, but since we have to look, among other things, at obstruction of justice, questions of obstruction of justice and perjury, the answer to some of these delicate and unfortunate questions are absolutely required. And that is the purpose that we have to ask them for.
That's not, Mr. Weisberg, with respect, You don't need to know the answer for that if the answer, no matter what the answer is, it wouldn't constitute perjury because it wasn't sexual relations as defined by the judge. The only reason you need to know that is for some other reason. It couldn't have anything to do with perjury.
If she says that you kissed her breast, would she be lying?
I'm going to revert to my former statement.
Okay. If Monica Lewinsky says that while you were in the Oval Office area you touched her genitalia, would she be lying? And that calls for a yes, no, or reverting to your former statement.
I will revert to my statement on that.
If Monica Lewinsky says that you used a cigar as a sexual aid with her in the Oval Office area, would she be lying? Yes, no, or won't answer?
I will revert to my former statement.
If Monica Lewinsky says that you had phone sex with her, would she be lying?
Well, that is, at least in general terms, I think is covered by my statement. I addressed that in my statement, and that I don't believe is...
Let me define phone sex for purposes of my question. Phone sex occurs when a party to a phone conversation masturbates while the other party is talking in a sexually explicit manner. And the question is, if Monica Lewinsky says that you had phone sex with her, would she be lying?
I think that is covered by my statement. Well, let me finish the sentence. I formed an opinion early in 1996. Once I got into this unfortunate and wrong conduct, that when I stopped it, which I knew I'd have to do, and which I should have done a long time before I did, that she would talk about it. Not because Monica Lewinsky is a bad person. She's basically a good girl. She's a good young woman with a good heart and a good mind. I think she is burdened by some unfortunate conditions of her upbringing. But she's basically a good person. But I knew that the minute there was no longer any contact, she would talk about this. She would have to. She couldn't help it. It was a part of her psyche. So I had put myself at risk, sir. I was not trying to buy her silence or get Vernon Jordan to buy her silence. I thought she was a good person. She had not been involved with me for a long time in any improper way, several months. And I wanted to help her get on with her life. It's just as simple as that. And in addition to that, I have sustained a breathtaking number of leaks of grand jury proceedings. And so I think I am right to answer all the questions about perjury, but not to say things which will be forever in the historic annals of the United States because of this unprecedented videotape and may be leaked at any time. I just think it's a mistake. And so I'm doing my best to cooperate with the grand jury and still protect myself, my family, and my office.
Mr. President, let's move ahead to the episode on November 29, 1993, in which Mrs. Willey met you in your office at the Oval. The subject matter of the 60 Minutes broadcast a few months ago. You recall that episode?
I certainly do.
Mr. President, in fact, on that date, you did make sexual advances on Kathleen Willey. Is that not correct?
That's false.
You did grab her breast, as she said.
I did not.
You did place your hand on her groin area, as she said.
No, I didn't.
And you placed her hand on your genitals, did you not?
Mr. Bennett, I didn't do any of that. And the questions you're asking, I think, betray the bias of this operation that has troubled me for a long time. You know what evidence was released after the 60 Minutes broadcast that I think pretty well shattered Kathleen Willey's credibility.